Hi everyone, we are Wanderlusters from International University. For target customer, we would like to focus on working mothers who have a serious concern about choosing quality health protection products for all family members. When choosing health-related products, mothers get confused by a variety of unevidenced self-claiming products, so they usually make a purchase based on brand names or just their feelings. However, they significantly need an official reference as well as a clear evidence to make the best decision for a healthier family. With the campaign name Happiness from Careful Choices, we provide the understanding of natural-based products, so mothers can make the best choices, and this will bring happiness for their family. Our slogan is Nature House, Safety Home. In the first phase, we deliver information about the importance and benefits when choosing qualified natural-based ingredients products. Other than that, we emphasize the image of 7th generation, an outstanding brand with high standards. We choose to advertise on Facebook, magazines, and OOH advertising. Let's move on phase 2. We are going to invite 3 KOLs, Miss Thái Vân Linh, Miss Thủy Tiên, and Miss Lan Khuê. They will spread the importance of a careful choice with full of love from mother will create a happy family. They will make videos to share and reveal their experience while using 7th generation. Our KOL will encourage everyone to spread their personal experience. For the ones who like fan page and review products, will receive small gifts for all discount vouchers from the brand. In phase 3, we will be a sponsor of Women's Summit. We aim to get all guests of the summit a combo of 3 products in order to try, get experience, and understand the product's quality. So, the brand image will spread by this conference and Forbes magazine. Finally, for every product to be sold, 10,000 Vietnam dong will be donated to the fund to buy a small tree. After that, we host a plant trees event. On that day, guests who bring empty bottles of 7th generation will receive trees and participate in the event. Especially, family members can come to the event as well. The campaign will last for 4 months, and this is our deployment plan. We estimate the budget for its phase at the following table. The total cost for this campaign is 11.5 billion Vietnam dong, incur 10%. That is the end of our proposal. Thank you for your listening.